The Devil's Sons motorcycle gang made a fatal mistake in Pine Valley, Colorado. They kidnapped a 16-year-old girl, never knowing her father was a decorated Navy SEAL. What followed would unleash a wave of vengeance that would destroy a criminal empire, expose a human trafficking network, and remind the underworld why America's elite warriors are the deadliest hunters on Earth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn wind swept through Pine Valley's colorful aspens as Thomas Hunter Pierce checked his daughter's room for the third time. Sarah's bed remained untouched, her backpack still missing, her phone going straight to voicemail. 20 years of special operations had taught him to trust his instincts, and every fiber of his being screamed that something was terribly wrong. The local police insisted that 16-year-old girls often stayed out late, that Sarah was probably at a friend's house, that 48 hours needed to pass before declaring her officially missing. But they didn't know what Pierce knew they hadn't seen. The Devil's Sons bikers circling the high school like vultures over the past week. They hadn't noticed the suspicious vans without OFATE plates photographing students between classes. Pierce stood at Sarah's window, his weathered face reflected in the glass, the scar along his jaw, a souvenir from a close-quarters fight in Kandahar, seemed more pronounced in the fading light. 15 years in SEAL Team 3 had honed him into one of the world's most lethal operators, but none of that training had prepared him for the hollow ache of a father's fear. The community bulletin board at Pine Valley High had started filling with missing person posters over the past month. 3 girls, all Sarah's age, all vanishing without a trace. The police blamed runaway troubled teens seeking adventure in Denver or Salt Lake City. Pierce had seen the patterns, recognized the signs of professional trafficking operations from his time hunting cartels in South America. He tried warning the school board, but they dismissed his concerns as paranoid overreaction from a war-wounded veteran. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah's best friend, Emma. Mr. Pierce, Sarah was supposed to meet me at the library after volleyball practice. She never showed the new guy she's been talking to online. I think he might be connected to those bikers. Everyone's scared of Pierce's hand tightened on the phone. Sarah was smart, careful, well tread in self-defense, but teenagers were vulnerable in ways that no amount of preparation could prevent. Their trust could be weaponized against them by predators who knew exactly what buttons to push. He moved through the house with the fluid precision that had once made him a legend in the teams, gathering essential gear from his locked gun safe. The police might need 48 hours, but Pierce had developed his own methods of gathering intelligence during his decades of hunting America's enemies. The local coffee shop owner, Mike Chen, was a former Force Recon Marine who kept careful watch over the comings and goings in Pine Valley. The high school janitor, Dave Martinez, had 2 daughters of his own and had been documenting the suspicious vehicles around campus. Susan, at the gas station, had security cameras covering every approach to town. Pierce had built his own network of eyes and ears, never expecting he'd need it to find his own daughter. His tactical phone, secure, untraceable, chirped with an encrypted message from his former teammate. KIRO satellite shows increased activity at abandoned lumber mill. Multiple vehicles matching Devil's Sons signatures. Thermal imaging indicates 12 plus heat signatures in main building. Standing by with full Spec Ops loadout. Say the word. Pierce checked his weapons one final time. Muscle memory from countless missions taking over. The Devil's Sons thought they were untouchable, protected by corrupt officials and their reputation for brutal violence. They thought they could steal daughters from their families, traffic innocent lives with impunity. They were about to learn why Navy SEALs were considered the world's deadliest hunters, why America's elite warriors were the last people you wanted as enemies. The autumn sun was setting behind the Rockies as Pierce stepped onto his porch, scanning the tree line with predator's eyes. In his SEAL days, they'd called him Hunter for his uncanny ability to track and eliminate high-value targets. Now those same lethal skills would be turned toward a deeply personal mission. His daughter was out there, scared and alone, counting on him to find her. I'm coming, baby girl, he whispered into the gathering darkness and God help anyone who tries to stop. The war for Sarah's life was about to begin. The Devil's Sons were about to discover that they hadn't just kidnapped another helpless teenager, they'd taken a Navy SEAL's daughter and Thomas Hunter. Pierce would tear their whole world apart to get her back. The abandoned lumber mill loomed against the darkening Colorado sky, its weathered buildings casting long shadows across the overgrown yard. Thomas Pierce moved like a ghost through the tree line, decades of special operations experience evident in every silent step. His thermal optics revealed heat signatures moving through the compound. Armed sentries maintaining practiced patrol routes. These weren't ordinary bikers, their movements showed professional training. Mike Chin's voice crackled through his encrypted earpiece. Two more Devil's Sons vehicles just pulled into town. They're asking questions at the diner, showing Sarah's picture. They're looking for something. Hunter Pierce's jaw tightened. The gang was running a counter-surveillance operation trying to determine if anyone had connected them to the disappearances. It confirmed his worst fears. This was an organized trafficking operation, not random kidnappings. Maintain observation, Pierce whispered. Let them think they're in control. His mind flashed back to Sarah's 13th birthday, teaching her situation awareness and basic self-defense. She complained, then asking why she needed to learn such serious skills in their quiet mountain town. He'd seen too much darkness in the world to leave her unprepared. The first Devil's Son appeared in his scope, a massive figure nicknamed Butcher according to local intelligence. The biker's leather cut displayed patches marking him as an enforcer, but it was the fresh scars on his knuckles that caught Pierce's attention. Someone had been fighting back recently. He memorized every detail, cataloging potential weaknesses with cold precision. Hunter movement at your 3 o'clock. Caro's voice came through the comms. Vehicle approaching. Blacked out SUV. No plates. Pierce melted deeper into the shadows, watching as the vehicle pulled up to the main building. The driver emerged, a well-dressed man who carried himself with authority. The biker straightened noticeably at his arrival. This was someone important, someone who commanded respect through fear. Running facial recognition, Caro reported. Subject identified as Marcus Kane, former military contractor. Multiple flags for suspected trafficking operations across state lines. He's connected. Hunter private security background, political protection. Pierce's blood ran cold. Kane's presence confirmed this wasn't just a local gang operation. It was part of something much larger. The well-dressed man began inspecting the compound, speaking sharply to the bikers about security measures. Pierce recorded everything with a tiny camera, building intelligence for the operation to come. His finger traced the trigger of his suppressed rifle. One shot could end Kane right now, but it wouldn't help him find Sarah. He needed Kane alive, needed to extract information about the trafficking network. Mr. Pierce, Emma's voice whispered through his secondary comm channel. I found something in Sarah's social media. The guy she was talking to, he used a fake profile, but I tracked the IP address. It connects to a Devils in Denver. Pierce allowed himself a grim smile. Emma's generation knew digital warfare in ways his never would. Good work, he replied softly. Send everything to Caro for analysis. Movement near the main building caught his attention. A group of bikers was escorting several young women toward waiting vans. Teenagers, frightened and subdued. Pierce's enhanced optics caught glimpses of their faces, matching them against the missing persons reports, but Sarah wasn't among them. They were moving the girls, splitting up their captives to make rescue more difficult. Those vans head out, we lose them, Caro warned local police. Our compromise won't respond in time. Pierce measured distances, calculated angles, considered options. Direct intervention now would alert the entire network, potentially putting Sarah in greater danger. But he couldn't let them move these other girls, couldn't sacrifice innocent lives for tactical advantage. The decision was made for him when one of the girls tried to run. A biker raised his hand to strike her, but the blow never landed. A whisper quiet shot from Pierce's rifle turned the biker's knee into ruin. Chaos erupted as the gang members scrambled for cover, unable to determine where the shot had come from. Multiple targets moving to defensive positions, Caro reported calmly. C is retreating to the SUV. Want me to disable the vehicle? Pierce was already moving, using the confusion to close distance. Negative, he replied. Let's see Run Hill lead us to their central operation focus on containing the others. The night exploded into precisely controlled violence. Pierce's years of close quarters combat training took over as he engaged multiple targets, each shot carefully placed to wound. Rather than kill, he needed prisoners for interrogation, needed to unravel this network piece by piece. The girls fled toward the tree line where Mike Chen waited to guide them to safety. Kane's SUV roared away way into the darkness as Pierce secured the compound. The Devil's Sons hadn't expected this level of opposition, hadn't prepared for an operator of his caliber. One of the wounded bikers stared up at him with fear-filled eyes. Who are you? Pierce zip-tied the man's hands, his voice cold as mountain ice. I'm a father, looking for his daughter, and you're going to help me find her. But Sarah wasn't at the lumber mill. This had been only a transit point, a temporary holding facility. The real operation was somewhere else, hidden behind layers of security and corruption. Pierce secured the prisoners for interrogation, knowing each one was a potential source of intelligence. The Devil's Sons had made a critical mistake targeting his daughter. Now they would learn why Navy SEALs were the last predators any criminal wanted hunting them. As police sirens wailed in the distance, Pierce melted away into the darkness. Phase 1 was complete. He disrupted their transport operation and gained valuable intelligence. But the real war was just beginning. Somewhere out there, Sarah was waiting for her father to find her, and Thomas Hunter Pierce would not rest until every member of this trafficking network faced justice. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The interrogation room in Mike Chen's hunting cabin was sparse and cold, illuminated by a single overhead light. Thomas Pierce studied the captured Devil's Sons enforcer, noting the man's nervous twitches, the way his eyes darted toward the exits. 20 years of special operations had taught Pierce to read people, to find the pressure points that would make them break. Your boss, Kane, he's running girls through multiple states. Pierce stated, his voice deliberately calm. The lumber mill was just one piece. I want to know about the others. The biker, who called himself Snake, tried to maintain his tough facade, but fear showed in the trembling of his hands. You don't understand what you're getting into, man. Ken's got protection. Federal judges, state police, politicians. You can't touch him. Pierce leaned forward, letting Snake see the cold fury in his eyes. My daughter is somewhere in your organization's network. Every minute you waste with misplaced loyalty puts her in greater danger. I'm not law for Snake. I don't have to play by their rules. The implications hung heavy in the air. Cairo's voice came through Pierce's earpiece. Satellite shows increased activity at 3 locations, matching Kane's vehicle patterns. They're moving fast, trying to clear out before we can track them. Pierce nodded slightly, keeping his eyes on Snake. The pressure of time was mounting, but rushing now would be dangerous. You think Kane cares about you? Pierce asked softly. Think he'll protect you? Look what happened at the lumber mill. Your brothers went down and he ran. Left you all to take the fall. Snake's expression flickered, doubt creeping in. Pierce pressed the advantage. He's not coming back for you, but you can still do the right thing. Help me find these girls, and I'll make sure you're protected. Snake's resistance cracked. There's a compound in the mountains near Ghost Lake Old Resort that went bankrupt. C uses it as a processing center before moving merchandise east. Pierce controlled his reaction to the word merchandise, channeling his rage into focus. How many guard security systems? As Snake detailed the compound's defenses, Cairo was already pulling satellite imagery, mapping approach routes and identifying vulnerabilities. The resort's isolation made it perfect for criminal operations and dangerous for a rescue attempt. They've got at least 30 professionals there. Snake continued, ex-military, private security types, plus some cartel liaison called Elano. Pierce's blood ran cold. El Serrano, the surgeon, was notorious in intelligence circles for his role in international trafficking operations. His presence confirmed this was bigger than the Devil's Sons, bigger than Can's organization. They'd stumbled onto a major pipeline in the global trafficking network. Mike 10 entered the room, his former force recon training evident in his controlled movements. Hunter, you need to see this. He handed over a tablet showing police communications. Local law enforcement was mobilizing, but not to investigate the missing girls. They were hunting for Pierce, describing him as an Unstable veteran interfering with official investigations, sees playing his cards. Pierce mused using corrupt officials to try to shut us down, he turned back to Snake. How often does Kane visit the resort? The biker swallowed hard. Every 3 days for inspection. He's due tomorrow night. Brings his personal security team. Real professional operators. Pierce's tactical mind was already formulating plans, calculating angles of approach and fields of fire. The resort's mountain location would make infiltration challenging, but the terrain would also constrain Ken's escape routes. Well, what about the girls? He pressed. And where do they keep them? Old wine cellar, under the main building, reinforced concrete, heavy security. But Snake hesitated. Your daughter, if she's still in the system, that's where she'll be. Kane likes to keep new acquisitions close until they're processed for transport. The way Snake said processed made Pierce's jaw clench. His phone vibrated. Emma had found something else in Sarah, so media, the fake profile that had been grooming her, shared location data with several other accounts, all following similar patterns. She'd mapped out a digital trail of predators, revealing an organized online hunting network. Ghost Lake Resort was bought through a shell company, Caro reported. Through the comms, traced it back to a larger corporation with ties to international banking. This is cartel money hunter. They're using legitimate businesses to hide their operations. Pierce stood his decision. Made the compound would be heavily defended, designed to repel conventional law enforcement. But he wasn't conventional law enforcement. He was a father with particular skills earned through decades of fighting America's darkest enemies. Mike, get Snake to a secure location, he ordered Caro. I need detailed thermal imaging of that compound, every guard position, every entrance, every potential vulnerability. He checked his weapons with mechanical precision, each movement deliberate and focused. C thinks he can use corrupt officials to stop us. Fine. We'll do this the S way. The autumn wind howled outside as Pierce prepared for war. Tomorrow night C would arrive for his inspection, expecting to find his operation secure. Instead, he would find a father's vengeance delivered with the precision and lethality that had made Navy SEALs the world's most feared warriors. I'm close, baby girl, Pierce whispered, checking his tactical gear one final time. Hold on just a little longer. The Ghost Lake compound was about to learn why criminals feared America's elite operators, why cartels warned their soldiers about Navy SEALs. Thomas Hunter Pierce was coming, and he was bringing the full weight of his training and experience to bear on their operation. The war for Sarah freedom was entering a new phase, and the mountains themselves would tremble with its violence. Ghost Lake Resort sprawled across the mountainside like a sleeping giant, its abandoned luxury cabins barely visible through the thick pine forest. Thomas Pierce studied the compound through high-powered optics, memorizing guard positions and patrol patterns. The autumn storm rolling in would provide perfect cover for infiltration, but it also meant his thermal imaging would be less reliable. Perimeter security is impressive. Cairo's voice crackled through his earpiece. Motion sensors in the tree-line cameras with AI recognition software, armed patrols with trained dogs. Ken's not taking any chances. After the lumber mill, Pierce watched another security team complete their rotation, noting their professional movements and tactical gear. These weren't ordinary guards. They moved like special forces operators. His tactical phone vibrated with an encrypted message from Emma. Mr. Pierce, I traced more of those fake social media profiles. They're using AI-generated photos and advanced algorithms to target specific types of girls. Sarah wasn't random. They chose her because their system flagged her as ideal merchandise. The word made his hand tighten on his rifle, but Pierce forced the rage down, channeling it into cold focus. Mike Chen's voice joined the tactical network. Local police just received orders to set up checkpoints on all mountain roads. They're using a missing fugitive story as cover, but they're really trying to box us in. Pierce allowed himself a grim smile. Kane was getting nervous trying to use corrupt officials to secure his operation, but he didn't understand who he was dealing with. Satellite shows Kane's convoy departing Denver. Caro reported 6 vehicles, heavy security detail. They're bringing in additional personnel. Looks like cartel protection for El Chuano ETA. 3 hours. Pierce checked his watch calculating timing the storm would hit just before sunset, providing optimal conditions for his assault. His mind flashed back to similar operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, infiltrating heavily defended compounds to rescue hostages. But this was different this time. It was personal this time. His daughter's life hung in the balance. He couldn't afford mistakes. Hunter. Hesitant state police just put out an APB on you. They're claiming you're an unstable veteran having a PTSD episode. Potentially dangerous. Kane's people are controlling the narrative. Pierce had expected this. It was a standard tactic to discredit threats to criminal operations. Let them think what they want. He replied coldly, it won't matter soon. Thunder rolled across the mountains as Pierce reviewed the intelligence they had gathered. The wine cellar, where they kept the girls, was a reinforced concrete structure originally designed to survive avalanches. It had one main entrance through the resort's kitchen and an emergency exit that vented to the north slope. Both would be heavily guarded. I've got something. Emma's voice carried excitement. The resort's original building plans show a maintenance tunnel that connects to the old generator room. It's not on any of the current security maps. Pierce pulled up the schematics on his tactical display. The tunnel would be tight, barely wide enough to crawl through, but it could provide the access he needed. Kyo status on our friends? Pierce asked, checking his specialized gear. Ghost team is in position, came the reply. 6 operators, all former special forces. They're maintaining distance but ready to support on your signal. These were men Pierce had served with, warriors who understood the moral imperative of this mission. The first fat drop of rain began to fall as Pierce made his final preparations. His loadout was carefully chosen: specialized breaching charges, non-lethal alternatives, and enough firepower to handle whatever resistance he encountered. The old maintenance tunnel would be that his insertion point, using the storm's interference to slip past the electronic security. Hunter. Caro's voice was serious. Thermal imaging shows at least 15 heat signatures in the cellar area. Multiple young females. Sarah could be among them. Pierce closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. What about Elano? Any sign of his arrival? Not yet, but intelligence suggests he's overseeing this operation personally. The cartel wants to ensure their investment is secure. The implications were clear. They were planning something big, something that required direct supervision from one of their most notorious operators. Pierce did one final equipment check, each movement precise, and practiced his custom suppressed rifle. Close quarters, backup weapons, breaching tools, and medical kit were all secured. The coming operation would require perfect timing and execution. Kane's security forces were professional, but they weren't SEALs. They hadn't spent decades perfecting the art of covert warfare. All units maintain radio silence unless emergency. Pierce commanded Ghost Team, hold position until my 6 if cans convoy arrives. Before I secure the objectives, delay them by any means necessary. A chorus of acknowledgments came through his earpiece as the storm intensified. Thunder crashed overhead as Pierce began his approach, moving like a shadow through the rain-soaked forest. Years of training and combat experience guided every step, every movement. Calculated to avoid detection, Kane thought his fortress was impenetrable, his operation secure. He was about to learn why Navy SEALs were considered the world's elite warriors. I'm coming, Sarah. Pierce whispered into the storm. Just hold on, baby girl, daddy's coming. The rain concealed his advance as he closed on the maintenance tunnel entrance, preparing to bring war to those who had dared to take his daughter. The devil's sons, Kane El Chuano. They were about to learn the terrible cost of targeting a SEAL's family. The ghost of death was approaching their mountain fortress, and his name was Thomas Hunter Pierce. The maintenance tunnel entrance was barely visible beneath decades of overgrowth, its rusted grate covered in thick mountain moss. Thomas Pierce worked methodically in the driving rain, his practiced hands clearing debris while maintaining complete situational awareness. The storm masked his movements, but it also meant the enemy's night vision equipment would be less effective, a tactical advantage he intended to exploit. K's convoy just passed the last checkpoint, Caro reported through encrypted comms. They 40 minutes out. El Chuano was confirmed in the second vehicle. Pierce acknowledged silently as He removed the grate, revealing a narrow concrete passage that disappeared into darkness. The tunnel would be a tight fit with his gear, but he trained for worse conditions, and SEAL confined space warfare courses his tactical display showed enemy patrol patterns mapped in ghostly green lines. The storm had disrupted their normal rotations, forcing the security teams to cluster closer to the building's amateur mistake by condensing their coverage they'd created. Blind spots he could exploit. Thunder crashed overhead as Pierce began his entry, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. The tunnel was exactly as challenging as he'd expected, barely wider than his shoulders, with irregular surfaces that could snag equipment or create noise, but this was familiar territory. Pierce had earned his SEAL qualification in similar conditions, mastering the art of silent movement. Through confined spaces, each motion was precisely controlled. His breathing steady and measured. Mr. Pierce, Emma's voice whispered through his earpiece. I've accessed their security network. Through a back door in their camera system, they're moving girls from the cellar to the main building. Something's happening. Pierce froze, listening intently. Above him, through feet of concrete and earth, he could feel the vibrations of movement. Confirmed. Caro added, thermal shows multiple heat signatures being relocated. They're gathering them in the resort's old ballroom. Looks like some kind of inspection or selection process. Pierce's jaw clenched. He'd seen this before during counter-trafficking operations, buyers examining merchandise before finalizing deals. The tunnel began to slope upward, leading toward the resort's foundation. Pierce's enhanced optics revealed structural details matching Emma's recovered blueprint. The main access point would open into the old generator room directly beneath the kitchen. From there, he could access both the cellar and the ballroom. Ghost team reporting increased activity on the perimeter. Mike Chen's voice was steady. Kane Security is setting up additional checkpoints. They're expecting company. Looks like buyers arriving for some kind of auction. Pierce's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a transfer point, it was a marketplace. The Devil Sons and C were just middle management. The real monsters were coming to bid on innocent lives. Pierce reached the generator room access panel, testing it carefully for security measures. His tactical scanner revealed no active electronics. This part of the building's infrastructure had been forgotten during the security upgrades. Amateur hour. In his SEAL days, they'd always said overconfident enemies made the easiest targets. The panel opened silently on well-oiled hinges. Pierce emerged like a shadow, his movements liquid smooth as he established a defensive position. The generator room was dusty and abandoned, filled with old equipment that provided excellent cover. Above him, floorboards creaked with movement guards patrolling the kitchen area. Hunter, be advised. Caro's warning carried urgency. Facial recognition. Just Ed, 2 of Cannes' new arrivals, former Serbian special forces. Suspected war criminals. These guys are serious operators. Pierce checked his weapons. He'd faced worse in Afghanistan, hunted deadlier prey in Iraq. These men might be professional killers, but they'd never faced a father protecting his child. His thermal imaging revealed guard positions through the ceiling. 4 men in the kitchen, moving in practice patterns. Their weapons were professional grade. Their equipment top tier. C wasn't sparing any expense on security, but they were watching for external threats, never expecting death to rise from beneath their feet. Emma, status on the security systems. Pierce whispered, preparing for his next move. Main power runs through junction boxes in the kitchen. She replied, cut those and their backup generators will take 20 seconds to engage. All security cameras and electronic locks will reset. Perfect. The girl's technical skills were impressive. She'd make an excellent intelligence operator. Someday. Thunder boomed outside as Pierce identified his targets. The kitchen guards were disciplined, but they'd made a critical error in their positioning. Their fields of fire were focused outward, leaving gaps in their internal coverage. In close quarters, combat gaps meant death. All units prepared to execute. Pierce commanded softly, Ghost team on my signal, create a diversion on the north perimeter. Mike, have medical standing by for multiple civilian evacuees. Emma, be ready to kill the power. Years of special operations experience had taught him that perfect plans rarely survived first contact, but proper preparation maximized survival odds. His mind flashed to Sarah's last birthday, teaching her to throw a proper punch. Why do I need to learn this, Dad? She'd asked, "Because the world is full of wolves, baby girl," he'd replied, "and wolves don't expect sheep to know how to fight." Back now, the wolves had taken his daughter, never realizing they'd actually stolen a lion cub. Pierce checked his watch. Kane's convoy was 30 minutes out. The storm was reaching its peak, providing maximum cover for what would come next. Soon, the Ghost Lake Resort would become a killing ground, its halls filled with the righteous violence of a father's vengeance. Time to go to work, Pierce whispered, readying himself for the assault. The next few minutes would determine everything. Kane El Chirano, the Devil's Sons. They were about to learn why Navy SEALs were considered the deadliest warriors in human history. The ghost of death was rising through their fortress, and his name was Thomas Hunter. Pierce moved like liquid shadow through the generator room, positioning himself beneath the kitchen floor. Above him, 4 professional operators maintained their patrol pattern, unaware that death was about to rise from below. The storm raged outside, masking any subtle sounds of his movement as he prepared for the assault. "Emma, initiate power disruption." "On my mark," Pierce whispered into his comm. His enhanced audio sensors picked up fragments of conversation from the guards above. They were discussing C's imminent arrival, the importance of tonight's auction. The casual way they spoke about selling young lives made his trigger finger itch, but Pierce maintained iron discipline. "Ghost team in position," Caro reported, facing heavy resistance on the north perimeter. "Can's Serbian contractors are coordinating defense with military precision." Pierce acknowledged, silently, counting down in his head. Timing would be everything. The power disruption would give him a 5-second window before emergency lights engaged, and he intended to make every millisecond count. Thunder crashed overhead as Pierce readied himself execute. He breathed. The resort's lights died instantly, plunging everything into perfect darkness. Pierce was already moving, his years of special operations experience guiding every motion. The access panel opened silently as confused shouts erupted above. The first guard died without a sound. Pierce's combat knife finding the precise spot between vertebrae that guaranteed instant silent incapacitation. The second guard managed half a turn before a precise strike collapsed his trachea. 20 years of close quarters combat training made Pierce's movements flow like deadly poetry, each motion efficient, each strike precisely calculated. "Contact rear," the third guard shouted, raising his weapon, but Pierce was already inside his guard, redirecting the rifle barrel while simultaneously driving his knee into the man's solar plexus. The fourth guard got off 2 shots, the muzzle flash illuminating the kitchen like lightning. Both rounds missed as Pierce moved with patrol speed, closing distance and engaging with a lethal hand-to-hand techniques. West Wing security responding to shots fired, Emma reported through comms. 8 hostiles moving to your position. Pierce zip-tied the surviving guards, quickly stripping them of weapons and communication devices. Their equipment was top-tier Serbian military spec, exactly as Caro had warned. The emergency generators kicked in, bathing the kitchen in dim red light. Pierce moved with practiced efficiency, securing the area while maintaining awareness of approaching threats. His SEAL training had prepared him for exactly this type of scenario. Multiple hostile forces, civilian hostages, time critical objectives. Hunter, be advised, Cairo's voice carried urgency. Thermal imaging shows increased activity in the ballroom. They're moving all hostages to the basement wine cellar. Whatever they were planning, they're accelerating the timeline. Pierce checked his tactical display. The closest approach to the cellar would take him through the resort's main dining room, likely heavily defended given its central location. "Emma, status on the security systems," Pierce demanded, reloading his suppressed weapon. "Main systems are rebooting, but they've got redundancies. I can't access internal cameras. We'll be back online in 30 seconds." He needed to move, but rushing would be fatal. The professionals Kane had hired would be expecting aggressive action, preparing for a frontal assault. The sound of approaching footsteps made Pierce smile coldly. The response team was using standard military clearing tactics, methodical by the book movements, but he'd written some of those books during his SEAL instructor days. He knew their weaknesses, their blind spots. "Mr. Pierce." Emma's voice shook slightly. "I've accessed their internal communications. They're talking about Sarah. She's being prepared for special presentation to a high-value buyer. Someone called. The surgeon wants to inspect her personally. Pierce's hand tightened on his weapon, but his voice remained deadly. Calm. Time frame 20 minutes. Kane's convoy just hit the mountain road, the storms slowing them down, but She didn't need to finish. Pierce was already moving his mind, calculating angles and approaches. The response team was seconds away from the kitchen, expecting to find disabled guards and an aggressive intruder. Instead, they found an empty room and disabled comrades. Pierce had vanished into the service corridor, using his knowledge of the building's layout to outmaneuver their defensive positions. They were good. These professionals Kane had hired, but they hadn't spent decades perfecting the art of close-quarters warfare like he had. Ghost team increased pressure on the north perimeter. Pierce commanded, make them think the main assault is coming from outside. He moved through the darkness like a predator, each step calculated, each movement precise. The first member of the response team died without ever seeing what hit him, a precisely applied blood choke that ended consciousness in seconds. The second and third operators went down in a blur of perfectly executed close combat techniques. Pierce moved with the fluid grace of a master practitioner, his decades of training evident in every strike. The fourth managed to raise an alarm before tactical silence was restored. Multiple hostile elements converging on your position, Caro warned. They're adapting to your tactics, switching to hunter-killer teams. Pierce allowed himself a grim smile as he secured his latest victims. Let them come, let them hunt. They were about to learn why SEALs were the apex predators in any environment. Sarah, baby, hold on, he whispered, checking his weapons before moving deeper into the resort's dark corridors. Daddy's coming. The storm raged outside as Pierce ghosted through the shadows, bringing death to those who dared to traffic in innocent lives. Kane's professionals were about to learn why targeting a SEAL's family was the last mistake they'd ever make. The old resort's dining rooms stretched before Pierce like a battlefield, its elegant furnishings providing both cover and concealment through the rain-stripped windows. Lightning illuminated the professional operators, moving in synchronized patterns. Kane's security teams had adapted quickly, implementing advanced small unit tactics designed to counter a superior individual operator. Target is highly trained. Pierce heard through an intercepted radio transmission, suspected Tier 1 operator. No engagement without three-man teams. Box him and force him to ground. The voice carried a distinct Serbian accent, one of the war criminals. Caro had identified these men, understood the threat they were facing, but understanding wasn't enough to save them. Hunter Kane's convoy is 10 minutes out, Caro reported through secure comms. El Chirano is coordinating with local assets. They're setting up a security corridor from the entrance to the wine cellar. Pierce processed this information as he moved silently between positions. The storm's intensity had increased, reducing visibility and creating additional audio cover. Emma's voice carried urgency. Mr. Pierce, I've accessed more of their communications. Sarah and 3 other girls are being prepared for private auction. The surgeon has specific buyers already arranged. They're accelerating everything because of the security breach. Pierce felt cold fury rising, but channeled it into lethal focus. Emotion was the enemy of execution. A 3-man team entered the dining room, moving with the smooth precision of experienced operator. Their night vision equipment gave them confidence in the darkness, but Pierce had trained for decades in conditions far worse than this. The first operator died silently, a precisely applied combat technique severing his coated artery. The second had time to register surprise before Pierce's knife found its mark. The third operator was better, managing to engage in hand-to-hand combat for several seconds. Contact, he shouted into his radio before Pierce's enhanced close-quarters training ended the fight, but the damage was done. More security teams were converging on the dining room, multiple elements approaching your position. Caro warned, thermal shows 12 hostiles implementing pincer movement. Pierce was already moving, using his intimate knowledge of close-quarters warfare to maintain tactical advantage. These men were good, but they'd never faced a Navy SEAL fighting for his daughter's life. Ghost team status on the perimeter assault. Pierce demanded, setting up his next engagement zone. Heavy resistance Came the reply: K's people have defensive positions well established. They're using the weather to their advantage. A professional operation, exactly as expected, but professionalism meant predictability, and Pierce had spent his career exploiting such patterns. Lightning flashed as the next security team breached the dining room. Pierce engaged with controlled violence, his movements a deadly dance of precise strikes and lethal efficiency. Years of special operations experience guided every action, every decision. Two operators fell before they could raise their weapons. The third managed to fire a burst that shattered an antique mirror before Pierce's counterattack eliminated the threat. Mr. Pierce, Emma's voice shook with emotion. They moving Sarah now. The surgeon wants to inspect the merchandise personally before Kane arrives. Pierce's hand tightened on his weapon, but his voice remained deadly calm. Location: service elevator to the wine cellar. 3 professional guards plus local muscle. They're using the girls as human shields. Classic terrorist tactics designed to prevent direct engagement. But Pierce hadn't spent 20 years in naval special warfare without learning how to handle such situations. The next wave of security operators demonstrated improved tactics using coordinated fire and movement to pressure his position. Pierce responded with the lethal creativity that had made him legendary. In the SEAL teams, each engagement was precisely calculated, each movement designed to create maximum psychological impact on the remaining defenders. K's convoy has reached the outer perimeter. Caro reported El Rano is coordinating final security suites. They're implementing full lockdown protocols, Pierce acknowledged as he eliminated another 3-man team. With mechanical efficiency, the resort was becoming a killing house. Its elegant halls transformed into a combat zone where his decades of experience proved devastatingly effective. Ghost team, initiate phase 2. Pierce commanded hit their communication center, disrupt their ability to coordinate. The sounds of distant explosions confirmed his orders were being executed. Kane's security operation was professional but conventional. They weren't prepared for an opponent who could strike anywhere, who turned their own defensive positions into deadly traps. Lightning illuminated the dining room again as Pierce moved toward his primary objective. The wine cellar access was heavily defended, but the security teams had made a critical error in their positioning that set blinds starred fields of fire designed to stop a frontal assault. Never expecting an attack from above. Sarah, hold on baby, Pierce whispered as he prepared for his next movement. Daddy's almost there. The storm raged outside as he ghosted through the shadows, bringing death to those who dared to traffic in innocent lives. Kane's professionals were learning too late why Navy SEALs were considered the world's deadliest warriors. The hunt was entering its final phase, and Thomas Hunter Pierce was about to remind these predators why they should have chosen different prey. The service elevator shaft descended into the resort's depths like an open wound in the earth. Thomas Pierce secured his tactical rope with practiced efficiency, his enhanced audio sensors picking up movement below. El Cuano security detail had transformed the wine cellar into a fortress, but they'd overlooked the vulnerability above them, a mistake that would prove fatal. Can's convoy has reached the main entrance, Caro reported through encrypted comms. El Cuano is coordinating with the auction security team. Thermal imaging shows 20+ hostiles establishing defensive positions around the cellar access points. Pierce acknowledged silently as he prepared for descent. The storm's fury penetrated, even hear vibrations from thunder rumbling through the elevator shaft. Emma's voice carried controlled urgency. Mr. Pierce, I've accessed their internal security feeds. Sarah and the other girls are being held in the central tasting room. The surgeon is personally inspecting each one, documenting them for specific buyers. Her voice cracked slightly. They're treating them like inventory. Pierce controlled his breathing as he began his descent, each movement precisely calculated to minimize noise. His mind flashed to Sarah's last swimming competition. How proud she'd been to qualify for state finals. Now these monsters were reducing her to a commodity, a piece of merchandise to be sold to the highest bidder. Ghost team reports heavy resistance on all approaches, Caro added. K's Serbian contractors have established interlocking fields of fire. They're using professional counter-assault Tactics Pierce smiled coldly in the darkness. He'd helped write the manual on those tactics during his years as a SEAL. Instructor,